Okay. So, did you guys like that video on weathermen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you learn anything from it? Was it beneficial?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And it goes along with what we're learning about in science class also. We're learning about high and low pressure. Yes, pressure systems. Okay, so has anybody ever wondered how weathermen predict weather?
Yeah.
Do you guys have any ideas?
They collect data.
Yeah, they collect data.
Maybe they go back and look at other years' weather patterns or whatever and see if it relates to this year.
Yeah, exactly. So how weathermen collect data is that they look at a day like today and they look at all the data that they have collected over many, many years of when the pressure systems were like they are today and all the other factors that go into it. They look at other days that were kind of like today and they say, okay, 80 days out of 100 of days just like this one, it rained. So we're going to predict that it is going to rain, that there's going to be an 80% chance of rainfall today. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we just talked about how weathermen actually use probability to predict the weather, and that is what this whole unit is about probability. Does anybody have any ideas of what they think probability is?
The chance of something happening.
The chance of something happening, yes. Probability is actually the likelihood of an event occurring, exactly like what you guys were saying. So, can anybody tell me what the word likelihood means? Because that's a big word, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
This is how you spell likelihood, I think. Yeah. Okay, so likelihood is like the chance that something's gonna happen. It's like the state or fact of something being likely. So talking about this and talking about likelihood, think about Stephen Curry. Does everybody know who Stephen Curry is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Okay, cool. What are the chances? Can you explain to me, using your words, not numbers, what the probability of him making a three-pointer would be? High. Yeah.
Very likely.
Very likely. Yes. Okay, yeah, I agree. Because why would we classify Curry making a three-pointer as likely?
Because he's good.
Because he's good.
He's done it before.
He practices a lot, right? If you practice at something, you get better at it. Okay, so good. So he's probably most likely going to make that three-pointer. So what if I decide that I want to shoot a three-pointer and I've never played basketball a day in my life? What would be the chances, using words, what would be the probability of me scoring a three-pointer?
Unlikely.
Not very likely.
Yeah, unlikely, not very likely. Yeah, I would categorize that as unlikely because if I've never practiced, then it's probably not going to happen. So why would we categorize that as unlikely and not say impossible?
Because there's a chance that you could get lucky and get it.
Right, yeah. Even though I've never shot a basketball in my life, there might be a chance that if I just threw it up there, old granny shot, that it could go in. So it would not put that in the impossible category, but it would be unlikely that it would happen. Okay, so thinking back to science, what we're learning in science right now, what do you think the chances of a hurricane happening in February would be?
Not very likely or unlikely.
Or impossible. Well,
Yeah.
maybe not impossible.
Yeah. Actually, I would probably classify the hurricane in February as unlikely. Yeah. Because do we know why? Have y'all learned that in science yet?
No, I don't think we have.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we have either. So, yeah, the probability that it would happen in February is unlikely mainly because it's not hurricane season, and the Earth is positioned so that the northern hemisphere is heated, which lessens the chance of a hurricane, which is kind of confusing, and we're not going to get into that today because this is math class. But why would did we go over why we wouldn't classify it as impossible? Okay. Why would we not put it in the impossible category?
Because it could occur.
Yeah, there could be a crazy event, a really warm winter, and a hurricane could occur. Very, very good. Okay, so you see how through these examples that we've been going through, we've been classifying them as what kind of words have we been using?
Likely,
Yes.
unlikely.
Yeah.
Impossible.
Impossible.
Certain.
Certain. Yeah. Oh yeah. Why would we not classify Curry making a 3-pointer? We said it was likely, right? Like probably is gonna happen. Why would we not classify that as certain?
Because he could mess up.
He could mess up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If the fans are yelling at him and he gets distracted, the ball could possibly not make it. So, yeah, so we have to be careful when we're categorizing things. Think about all of the options. Very good. So, what I want us to do to make sure we know like what the categories of likelihood are when we're categorizing probability is I want us to make an organizing chart. So here are the charts. And what I want us to do is I want us to go ahead and label them. And then we're going to talk about each one. And as we're labeling these, think of some examples that you could put in each category. So the first category on the left is going to be impossible. I'll put it down here. Okay, so what are some things that are impossible?
It raining cats and dogs.
Yes, very good. That is impossible. You're right. A cat could fall off the roof, but that's not technically raining. So it is. That's the chance of that happening is impossible. So thinking about numbers now, we want to put numbers with each category. What would the percent chance of impossible happening be?
Zero.
0. Yes. So go ahead and write that in your organizer. 0%. Okay, if I wanted to express 0% in decimal form, do we know what that would be?
0.0.
Yeah, 0.00. That's right. And if I wanted to put 0% in the form of a fraction, what would that be?
0 over 0.
Yeah, 0 over 0. Sorry, these aren't meant to be trick questions, but sometimes they come out to be. Okay, and so let's go ahead and put an example of what impossible would be. Raining cats and dogs. Exactly. Okay, so any questions on that category before we move on?
Nope.
All right. So our next category is going to be unlikely. So go ahead and label that unlikely. I'll give you guys a chance to catch up if you haven't caught up yet. Okay. Are we good?
Yes.
probability of something being unlikely? What do we think of when we think of something being unlikely?
It could happen, or it could not. I mean, like.
Yeah.
It probably won't
could not.
happen.
Yeah, it probably won't happen. Right. Can anybody think of an example?
It probably won't snow in July.
That's right. Yep. Well, I'll go ahead and write that down here. Snowing in July.
In North Carolina.
Yes. That's good that you added that on there. Very good. And why would we categorize this as unlikely but not impossible?
Because it's probably going to be too hot, but it might be a weird summer and it might get cold one day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, when you think of something being unlikely, is there a certain percent that comes to mind? Would it be above 50% or below 50%?
Below.
Below 50%. Okay, so I'm going to put 25. That's the normal percentage of unlikely. That's what we're going to label it as. So how would we write 25% in decimal form?
0.25.
Yeah. 0.25. Very good. That's how we represent it in decimal form. Now, if we wanted to represent this in a fraction,
1/4.
1/4. Yes. Can anyone explain to me why it is 1/4?
Because 25%, if you shaded a circle into 4 different pieces, it would be 1 piece.
Yes. Yes. It would be if you have 4 parts of a whole, you would have 1 part of that shaded, and that would be an unlikely chance. Okay, so our next category is going to be equally likely. So when I say equally likely, what do you think? What do you think of? Yeah, it would be either or, basically. Like it could happen or it couldn't happen. So can anybody think of an example of an equally likely event?
Could be cloudy, or maybe
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, it could be cloudy on. It could be cloudy today. Yeah. And if something is like where it could happen, where it couldn't happen, what do you think the percent chance would be? 50%. Yes. How would you write that as a decimal?
0.50.
Yep. 0.50. How would you write that as a fraction?
Half.
1/2.
Yep, 1/2. Is 2/4 equally likely?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
It reduces to a half.
Yes, very good, because 2/4 reduces to a half. And that's the same for any of these fractions. Okay, our next category is likely. Can someone give me an example of a likely event? I know he's like getting y'all's brains all picked apart.
That people will put up Christmas lights in December.
Yes. Okay. Very good. And why is this likely?
Because Christmas is in December.
Right.
So
Because Christmas is in December. And most people do decorate for Christmas, but some people don't. So it's a likely chance, but we couldn't make it certain. So looking at what we did for unlikely and equally likely, what do you think the percent chance of likely of an event that's likely would be?
75.
Yeah, 75. How would we say that as a decimal?
0.75.
And as a fraction?
3/4.
Yes, 3/4. Or any other form that reduces to 3/4. Okay, if I was wanting to visually represent, I know that Brittany said earlier that for the unlikely, you could shade in a fourth of it, right?
Mhm.
So, if I wanted to visually show equally likely, what would that be?
Half of
Half
the
of it.
circle.
That's right. You shade that in, and you will want to add this to your organizer so that you can have it. And then what about impossible?
Don't shade anything in.
Yes. So true. Okay. And then what about likely?
3/4.
3/4. That's right. You would shade in 3/4 of it. Okay, one more category and then we're done. Hang with me. Okay, certain is our last category. So can somebody give me an example of an event that is certain to happen?
Does it have to be an event, or can it just be a fact?
Just what you got?
This marker will write black. It's a black marker, so
Yeah.
it's certain that it will write black.
Yeah. A black marker writing black. Okay, and what do you think the percent chance of a certain event happening is?
100.
Yes. And how do we express that in decimal form?
1.00.
Yep. And what about fraction?
1/1.
1/1 equals 1. Very good. Now, is there something in particular that we notice about these fractions?
They get bigger.
Yeah, they get bigger as we go. What are they also between?
They're in between 0 and 1.
Yes, they're in between 0 and 1. Now, is 50% between 0 and 1?
Yeah.
Yes, because we can clearly see in decimal and in fraction form that it is between 0 and 1. So what is a statement that we can make about probability with what we
It's
just said?
always in between 0 and 1.
Yes. Now, you write that somewhere on your sheet. Probability is always between 0 and 1. Very good. Oops. Okay, so now what we're going to do is is there any questions about categorizing events? No? Okay. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to hand out these event lists, and I want us to go through and to label each event, to categorize each event into what probability we think it would have. Okay, now you'll notice that some of the events don't have percents or decimals or whatever, and that's because I want you guys to use your technology and to research what would happen, like what the chance of it happening is. So let's do number 1 together. So number 1 says the probability of a hurricane occurring in September. Okay, so can somebody Google that for me real quick?
It's likely.
Yes, it is likely. And it's likely because September is the peak of hurricane season. especially in North Carolina. So the probability of a hurricane occurring in September would be categorized as likely because it's most likely to happen than any other month in the year. So does that make sense? How we're supposed to do this? Okay, so there's 10 of these, and if you have questions, I'll be walking around, and then we'll go over them after we're finished.
Do we work together?
Yes, feel free to work together.